I'm joined, my first guest is Manish Tewari, Congress MP and member of Parliamentary Group on Defence, the Consultative Committee of Parliament on Defence. Manish Tewari, appreciate your joining us. Since the government has announced the Agnipath scheme, we've seen massive protests already in the last 48 hours in Central and North India. Army aspirants worried about their future. Do you also appreciate the fear and anxiety of the aspirants as an opposition leader and someone who tracks national security?
Rajdeep, I absolutely empathize with the fears, apprehensions and anxieties of the young people who are protesting. However, having said that, we need to understand that the nature of warfare has completely transformed itself over the past decade or decade and a half. And the armed forces are not an employment guarantee program. Going back almost 3 decades now, most armed forces have transitioned to a very light footprint on the ground while being very heavy on technology and weaponry. So therefore, under those circumstances, if India requires a younger profile for its armed forces, if it requires that ultimately its pension bill also comes within manageable limits, you need to transition to a new paradigm. So therefore, this is a scheme which the government has announced. It should be allowed to play itself out. And if at all there are any glitches, those glitches can be ironed out. I think what the government needs to give clarity on is the transitioning process post 4.5 years. Because I can understand somebody coming out at the age of 21 or 22, he or she would obviously be apprehensive about their future. So a transitioning process which takes you out of the armed forces and into some form of regular employment, whether in the paramilitary forces or the state police forces, is something which the government must build into the scheme. And I think that to a large extent will be able to allay the apprehensions of people.
It's very interesting, Manish Tewari, because you seem to be welcoming the scheme on a day when your party and many other opposition leaders are very critical of it. Rahul Gandhi has spoken out against it strongly on Twitter, has said that with threats on 2 fronts, schemes like this will reduce the operational readiness of the army. He's saying it is playing with the future of the youth of the country. And says BJP should stop playing with the dignity and traditions of the forces. So you clearly are actually again at odds with your party leadership on the issue of Agnipath.
Well, Rajdeep, without making any value judgment on something which somebody else may have said, I have written extensively with regard to civil-military relations in my book, which was released in the December of 2021. And let me point out as to how the current nature of the Indian armed forces came into existence. You see, before 1857, the British essentially had 3 armies: the Madras Army, the Calcutta Army and the Bombay Army. And the recruitment into these armed forces were from and amongst high-class or upper-caste Hindus. It is during the First War of Independence in 1857 when the sepoys of the Bengal Army, who were in the vanguard of this revolt/struggle for independence, that the British actually coined the martial race theory. There was a Jonathan Peel Commission in 1859, and then they identified 15 castes from which they thought or who had been friendly to the British during the First War of Independence, and they would start recruiting from these particular castes, and most of them were located in North India. So between 1870 and 1945, till the end of the Second World War, there was very heavy recruitment from Delhi all the way up to the Khyber Pass, which in Pakistan is of course called the Punjabiization of the army. But that is essentially how these martial caste regiments came into existence. Way back in 1966, we tried to correct this anomaly by bringing in something called the recruitment male population policy, whereby recruitment into the armed forces would be a percentage of the population of that particular state or union territory into the population of India. So therefore, under those circumstances, to continue with a paradigm which was put in place by the British imperialists for entirely ulterior reasons in the 21st century, I really do not see any rationale to it.